Philosophy of awakening and inner freedom. When a man begins to awaken, the world around him no longer appears the same. He still walks the same streets, still meets familiar faces, still hears the daily chatter, but something fundamental has shifted. It is not the world that has changed, it is his eyes that see differently. He now perceives beneath the surface, discerning what he once ignored. Most of the conversations surrounding him, when looked at closely, reveal themselves to be empty spirals. People speak in order to escape silence. They flatter so that they might be flattered in return. They agree not out of conviction, but to avoid conflict. They complain in search of sympathy. But how often do people speak with honesty? How often do words arise from a genuine search for truth? Rarely, if ever. When he was not yet awake, he joined in. He too laughed, nodded, complained, and conformed. He thought this was connection. But as his vision sharpened, he realized he had been trading authenticity for comfort, truth for belonging. He understood that what he had once called connection was, more often than not, a performance. Awakening begins in the moment one no longer wishes to make such a trade. Once he sees clearly, the man does not crave attention as before. He no longer hungers for the approval of others. He withdraws, not out of bitterness, not out of contempt, but because it no longer feels necessary. The crowd clings to one another out of fear of silence. They build bonds upon habit and shared illusions. They need others to reflect their values back to them so they may feel secure. But when one ceases to reflect those values, he suddenly becomes a stranger in their eyes. He does not argue. He does not resist. He does not try to prove anything. He simply stops. He stops giving false praise. He stops nodding when he disagrees. He stops smiling merely to please. And that stopping alone creates distance. The crowd senses a gap. They claim he has changed. Yet in truth, he has merely laid aside the mask he once wore. The distance is not of his making. It arises naturally when one participant leaves the stage. The solitude he enters is not loneliness. It is chosen stillness. People confuse the two. They look upon a man sitting alone and call it loneliness. But many are loneliest of all in the midst of noise and laughter, while one who sits quietly in solitude may feel whole and complete. He learns to remain with himself. He no longer seeks conversation to cover emptiness. He no longer fills his days with distractions to flee from silence. At first, silence feels heavy, like a dark abyss, but gradually he discovers there is nothing fearful there. Silence, once faced, reveals itself not as emptiness, but as peace. Within that stillness, he sees himself as he truly is. There is no audience to impress, no image to maintain, no role to fulfill. What remains is truth. And truth, even when cold and bare, gives a strength no amount of flattery could ever provide. One who has never dared to sit with himself in silence will forever remain dependent on the crowd. Most human relationships are not built on truth, but on illusion. People come together to complain, to chase status, to defend beliefs they have never examined. This is not connection, it is complicity in a shared performance. He once joined in. He once believed such bonds were friendship, partnership, belonging. But now he sees them for what they are, the exchange of familiar illusions. When he withdraws, many of these bonds dissolve. No arguments are needed, no dramatic breaks. They simply fade. Without his effort to sustain them, they collapse of their own accord. Others perceive him as distant. He knows he is simply being honest. He no longer utters words against his conviction merely for harmony. He no longer pretends to agree in order to be liked. He no longer adds his voice to the chorus of empty talk. Yet this does not mean he despises humanity. He still cares, still listens. He only refuses to act a part, and by not playing, he becomes a mirror in which others see their own performance. Few can bear such a reflection. His presence unsettles, not because he judges them, but because his silence exposes the falseness in themselves. Thus he becomes difficult to read, difficult to categorize. He is not competing, not flattering, not striving to entertain. People find him strange, not because he has become complicated, but because he has become simple. He no longer participates in the game, and so he discovers freedom. When he no longer depends on recognition, he is free. When he no longer fears silence, he is at peace. When he no longer wears a mask, he is true. This is not withdrawal from life. It is entrance into life from a new place. A place without dependence, without chains, without the weight of others' judgments. Inner freedom does not mean severing all ties. It means being no one's servant, not to praise, not to criticism, not to expectation. One may still connect with others, but only if the connection arises naturally, free from performance and demand. One may still love, but not with clinging or need. He knows that few will walk with him in such truth. True companionship is rare. It cannot be forced. It arises only when two who are free meet and choose, without need to walk together. Until then, he does not see solitude as a burden. He sees it as a gift. For in solitude, he finds truth. In silence, strength. In forsaking illusion, freedom. Outwardly, his life appears quieter, less full, but inwardly it is richer, deeper, more real. He learns that the world need not awaken for him to remain awake. The crowd need not agree for him to be clear. He need not explain himself to be whole. For truth does not require agreement to remain true. It needs only to be lived. He lives it, walking his own path without noise, without spectacle, without the search for praise. He walks alone but not lost. He walks in silence but not in loneliness. He walks in simplicity, in authenticity, in the calmness of freedom. Once one awakens, there is no return. The crowd may continue their play, but he no longer takes part. Not out of disdain, but because he no longer finds value in the performance. The solitude he embraces is not an end, but a beginning. It is the beginning of a life unchained, fearless, genuine. And in that stillness, he discovers what so many chase yet never find: peace.